Just last month, I had to read 4,057 pages of the General Appropriations Act for 2025.
The General Appropriations Act, or GAA. Officially, it is the blueprint of progress. Unofficially, it has become the most expensive menu of pork, perks, and political deals this government ever prints. Education, health, infrastructure, defense, social services. It is supposed to be the roadmap of national priorities. It's just a proposal. Think of it as the president saying, "Ito ang gusto kong gastusan." It mirrors his promises, his politics, and his power. But let's be clear. Speaker Martin Romualdez, Appropriations Chair Zaldico, Senator Grace Poe, we are drowning. Not just in flood waters, but in the flood of corruption. And no flood control project can ever contain. Every time the court severs one head of the pork barrel hydra, 5 more grow. Each uglier, each greedier. PDAF, DAP, insertions, different names. Same monster. And now, as we end 2025, the consequences unfold before us.
She's not just a big star out of Cebu. She's the most proficient, most viral, and most relevant political social media voice ever produced by the Visayas. A lawyer, a city treasurer, and a transgender woman who proved that truth. When spoken with courage, can move millions. Attorney Regal Oliva is not a product of influence. She built it from the ground up. From transforming Mandawi City's tax collection from 650 million pesos to 3.4 billion pesos, to serving as president of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines Cebu City Chapter, she has spent her life inside government, not protecting power, but holding it accountable. But Regal's fight goes beyond politics. She is a proud LGBTQ community champion, one of the first openly trans leaders in Philippine government. As IBP Cebu City President, she fought for inclusion in legal spaces that once shut people like her out, proving that representation isn't just visibility, it's leadership. Her courage opened doors for countless others to live authentically and to see that dignity and service have no gender. Raw, intelligent, unafraid, Regal POV isn't just commentary, it's conviction. It's where law meets leadership and empathy meets impact. In a world where most choose silence, she speaks, not to impress, but to awaken. She's a lawyer who turns legal jargon into common sense, a public servant who proves that integrity still has an audience, and a woman who reminds us that good governance isn't a theory, it's a daily fight. This is Attorney Regal Oliva, the voice that cut through the noise, the conscience that built a community, and the courage that turned into a movement. And today, Regal POV is proudly PGMN.
The national budget is more than numbers on paper. It is law, politics, and power rolled into 4,000 pages that decide who gets what, when, and how. Every year, we are handed this thick book called the General Appropriations Act, or GAA. Officially, it is the blueprint of progress. Unofficially, it has become the most expensive menu of pork, perks, and political deals this government ever prints. Where does it all start? Or where does it begin? The process starts in Malacanang. Under Article 7, Section 22 of the Constitution, the President must submit a budget of expenditures and sources of financing to Congress within 30 days from the opening of the regular session. This is called the National Expenditure Program, or NEP, the President's proposed spending plan. It is drafted by the Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, after consulting every department and agency. It tells us how much money each office gets and for what. Education, health, infrastructure, defense, social services. It is supposed to be the roadmap of national priorities. But let's be clear. The NEP is not yet law. It's just a proposal. Think of it as the president saying, "Ito ang gusto kong gastusan." It mirrors his promises, his politics, and his power. For the 2025 budget, the NEP was submitted in June 2024, a full year ahead of the implementation. The moment it reached the House of Representatives, it became fair game. Hearings were called, agency heads were grilled, and from that point on, political interests began to seep in. Once in the House, the NEP transforms into the General Appropriations Bill, or GAB. By constitutional mandate, Article 6, Section 24, all money bills must originate from the House since they represent the people. The GAB goes through hearings, debates, and amendments where cabinet members defend their budgets. These are the so-called budget hearings. After approval, it moves to the Senate for its version. The Senate cannot initiate the budget, but once the House passes the GAB, it may propose amendments. In 2024, the Senate Finance Committee, chaired by Senator Grace Poe, conducted its own hearings, crafted its own version, and inevitably, it clashed with the Houses. Now, you have two versions of the law. Conflict is not a bug, it's the system. Enter the Bicameral Conference Committee, or simply the BICAM. Its members are chosen by the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, usually chairs of the Appropriations and Finance, plus a few chosen allies. Their job is to reconcile differences, but in truth, it's where the magic happens, where billions appear and disappear. What was debated openly in plenary may be rewritten behind closed doors. Transparency dies in the BICAM room. And then there's the notorious small committee, a House invention. After second reading, a tiny group is empowered to accept last-minute amendments before the third reading. Is this in the Constitution? No. But under Article 6, Section 16, each chamber can determine its own rules. So technically, yes, it's legal. Politically, it's backdoor. In 2025, this so-called small committee reportedly included Speaker Martin Romualdez, Appropriations Chair Zaldico, Senate President Cheese Escudero, and Finance Chair Grace Poe. But later, everyone denied it, saying it was just Zaldico. Then maybe that's the smallest small committee in Philippine history. In legal theory, all amendments must be made in the open, through plenary debates. But in practice, insertions creep in through the small committee or BICAM. These are not typos. These are billions suddenly earmarked for flood control, multi-purpose halls, evacuation centers, or financial assistance. The Supreme Court in Belgica versus Executive Secretary in 2013 already ruled that post-enactment congressional intervention is unconstitutional. Yet these amendments persist, smuggled in before the president signs the law, but designed for post-enactment control. A clever way of bending the law without breaking it outright. That's why the 2025 budget earned its label, the worst and most corrupt in history. On the House side, Martin Romualdez, Zaldico, and their bloc. On the Senate side, Cheese Escudero, Grace Poe, and others who stayed silent. Billions for flood control padded in, ayuda disguised as social services, infrastructure aligned with electoral maps. It wasn't plan for progress. It was a manual for manipulation. When the bill reached Malacanang, President Bongbong Marcos didn't sign right away. He used his line item veto power under Article 6, Section 27, Paragraph 2, allowing him to strike specific appropriations without vetoing the entire law. Sound surgical? Yes. But remember this, what he did not veto, he approved. At the IBP National Convention in 2024, in front of 5,000 lawyers, Marcos bragged that while lawyers review contracts of hundreds of pages, he read all 4,000 plus pages of the GAA.
Just last month, I had to read 4,057 pages of the General Appropriations Act for 2025.
Which means he saw everything. The flood control billions, the duplications, the padding, and he let them through. By inaction, he became the architect of approval. The 2025 GAA was never just a financial document, it was a political roadmap. Billions in ayuda released right before elections.
Una nang inaprobahan ng DBM ang 2 bilyong pisong pondo para sa AICS program para mabigyan ng cash assistance ang eligible na benepisyaryo na apektado ng krisis.
Rewards for congressmen who signed the impeachment complaint against Sara Duterte. Coincidence? Or vote buying hidden in the fine print of appropriations? Let's call it what it is. Governance as campaign strategy. Once enacted, the executive begins to spend, but agencies cannot disburse funds without a special allotment release order, SARO, from the DBM, and then a notice of cash allocation or NCA, the official signal for payment. This is where Malacanang's control becomes absolute. They can delay, accelerate, or block releases. Meanwhile, contractors line up. Projects are padded. Ghost flood control projects rise from the mud.
Iyan naman kayo sa inyong kapwa Pilipino.
Kahayupan na ito. Hindi tao to mga taong to.
Ang laman po ng isang maleta nasa 50 million po.
So nagkakasino po kayo?
Ilamin ko po.
Doon sa interview mo, binili mo yung isang Rolls Royce dahil nagandahan ka sa payong?
Sir, yes po.
Halos pare-pareho ang pattern. Minamasaker ng mga kawatan ang pondo ng bayan.
Tagabuhat lang ako ng malita ng basura. Malita na may lamang pera.
Ito ay bahagi pa din ng script at sarswela ni Martin Romualdez.
Today, I tender my resignation as Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Hindi mo ba siguro inisip? Nagbayad ng hindi complete.
And in the middle of this frenzy, phone calls are made. Legislators remind departments, akin yan ha, don't forget my cut. SOPs, standard operating procedures, run as high as 25 to 30% of the project costs. When even ghost projects can bleed real money, that's not governance. That's grave robbery. Corruption festers at every stage. At formulation, when the NEP is manipulated. At legislation, when insertions are smuggled in. At execution, when releases are selective. At implementation, when contracts are overpriced or never done. This is how syndicates and favored contractors like the Discayas secure their slots by bidding not for projects, but for politicians. The highest SOP wins, and the people lose. We have the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, the Procurement Law, RA 9184, and the Code of Conduct for Public Officials, yet they all remain powerless paper shields. Because when the guardians of the Treasury are the same hands that raid it, the law becomes a mere decoration. The saga of pork barrel is the saga of our Supreme Court.
Budget Secretary Butch Abad says government is proposing a 27 billion peso allocation for pork barrel next year. That amount is unchanged from what was budgeted this year. Abad says they've come up with a menu of projects where the pork barrel should be spent
to ensure the use of funds will be in line with the Aquino administration's priority programs. Amid the so-called pork barrel scam, Abad also clarifies the Budget Department releases funds to agencies and not to non-government organizations.
In Belgica versus Executive Secretary, decided in 2013, the court struck down the PDAF, or Priority Development Assistance Fund, which allowed legislators to choose projects and beneficiaries after the budget was enacted. It violated the separation of powers. In Araulio versus Aquino, decided in 2014, the court struck down the DAP or DAP, or Disbursement Acceleration Program, for allowing the executive to declare savings mid-year and transfer them to other programs. A usurpation of Congress's power of the purse. But in Gingona versus Carage, decided in 1991, the court also clarified Congress can realign or reduce items during deliberations, so long as these changes happen before enactment. They are constitutional. That's the fine line between amendment and abuse. Yet Congress and Malacanang dance on that line. They call pork amendment and call collusion coordination. Every time the court severs one head of the pork barrel hydra, 5 more grow, each uglier, each greedier. PDAF, DAP, insertions, different names. Same monster. Our budget system has become a mythical hydra. For every corrupt head, the court cuts off 5 more growing back, dripping with greed. And like Hercules, the people keep fighting. But the beast grows faster than justice can strike. We kill the pork, and it returns as realignment. We kill the DAP, and it resurrects as flood control. We kill the flood control, and it rises again as ayuda. Every reform they promise just gives birth to another head of the same beast. The budget is supposed to be a covenant between government and people. Instead, it has become a conspiracy between politicians and contractors. Marcos may have vetoed a few items, but by approving the rest, he didn't just co-sign corruption, he authored it. And now, as we end 2025, the consequences unfold before us. South Korea has pulled back loan assistance. European banks refuse to accept Filipino exchanging foreign currencies. The stock market has lost almost 2 trillion pesos in value in 1 quarter. We are drowning, not just in flood waters, but in the flood of corruption. And no flood control project can ever contain. Billions that should have built schools, hospitals, internet lines, and public transport have been siphoned into ghost projects and golden pockets. We have watched our country decline, not because we lack money, but because we lack morality. And so I say, we cannot end this by silence. We end this by demanding transparency, accountability, and justice. Because courage is not found in noise. It is found in standing up, even when the system tells you to sit down. The hydra of corruption grows when the people stop cutting. So let us not stop. Let us strike again and again until one day, finally, the people slay the beast. Another day, another Regal POV. This is Regal Oliva, and we are proudly PGMN.